Why is it so difficult to talk to someone who has mental illness? Why does every conversation with them turn into a giant argument? What can I do to make those conversations better?
Hello everybody, this is Ellie and welcome to Fairy's Heart. Do you know that 1 out of 7 people in Hong Kong has mental illness? Yes, 1 in 7, which means there are a million patients in Hong Kong. Therefore, you probably have in your work at least one of them at some point in your life. However, many people find it very difficult to talk to someone who has mental illness. They realize that people with mental illnesses often reject the emotional support, and their conversations often turn to conflicts, if not full-blown arguments. So, what has gone wrong? Well, a lot of times, it actually has a lot less to do with the content of the conversation, but more to do with the energy, timing, and mindset. So today I'm going to talk about 4 mistakes that you might have made when you talk to someone who has mental illnesses and what you can do to avoid them. These are very simple tips, but just by implementing them, you probably can see a very big difference in your conversation. Just to be clear, these tips are designed for providing emotional support. So if you have other purposes in mind, let's say you want to talk someone out of a very dangerous lifestyle, or you want to express your frustrations towards behaviors that you do not approve, then these techniques may not be the best for achieving your goals. If you want me to make a video on those topics, please let me know in the comments. With that out of the way, let's jump to the first technique.
The first mistake that you want to avoid is to go into the conversation with the intention of cheering someone up.
Now, you might be very surprised to hear this. Why would we even want to enter a conversation with someone who has mental illness if we're not there to cheer them up? After all, they are probably friends and families that we deeply care about. It hurts us to see them suffer. The problem about it is that it is an unrealistic expectation.
People who have mental illnesses tend to have maladaptive beliefs that are very, very hard to change.
There is a reason why they have to pay tens of thousands just to see clinical psychologists or psychiatrists. It is precisely because it is very difficult to talk someone out of mental illness just by 1 or 2 casual conversations.
Therefore, it is important for you to manage your expectations so that you don't feel disappointed.
What's worse is that if you go into the conversation with the intention of cheering the person up, you're likely to feel very frustrated. And this emotion will soon be picked up by the person you're talking to. As time goes by, you might realize that no matter how hard you try to comfort them, they are still extremely distressed. And this frustration will soon appear on your face, and trust me, it will be extremely obvious to the other side. As you can imagine, this will appear extremely disrespectful and might even shut down the conversation completely. This is something you absolutely want to avoid because it's not easy for someone who has mental illness to open up.
What you should do instead is to go into the conversation with the expectation that they probably wouldn't change their mind.
In fact, your value lies in your ability to accept and listen to them, even if they never get better. You're there to tell them, listen, I care about you, and even if you never recover from your illness, you'll still always be important to me.
The next mistake is to provide emotional support when you're clearly not ready.
Listen, in the perfect world, we have unlimited energy and time, and we can provide emotional support whenever we want. But the reality is, most of us are tired and stressed after a busy day at work, and we are nowhere near prepared to listen to someone else's troubles when we have quite a lot of troubles on our own already. So what happens when you try to enter an emotionally charged conversation when you're not ready? The answer is that it will usually lead to a huge argument.
The reason is, talking to someone who has mental illnesses can be very energy consuming.
After all, you might be exposing yourself to many negative emotions and thoughts, traumatic memories, or even vivid details of suicide and self-harm.
And if you are fully attentive during the conversation, it's almost guaranteed that you feel more and more tired as the conversation goes on. As your energy runs out, you will soon find yourself losing patience, and sooner or later, you won't be able to keep your cool, and boom, it turns into a giant fight.
This is why providing emotional support when you're not ready is sometimes worse than not even having a conversation in the first place.
What you should do instead is to correctly evaluate your ability to handle the situation and judge accordingly. If you don't feel like you're ready, maybe it's just better for someone else to do the job. Maybe you can talk to your spouse and ask her to talk to your child instead. Or maybe you can talk to them and tell them you're a bit tired at the moment, but you would love to talk to them the next day if they want to. Or maybe there are other ways for you to support them, like giving them a hug or cooking them a good meal.
There are many ways to get around it, but the bottom line is, you want to make sure that you don't overestimate yourself and force yourself to provide emotional support when you're not ready.
The following mistake is actually related to our last point, but instead of you feeling not ready for the conversation, it's actually the person who has mental illness who is not prepared to talk. If you approach a person and force them to open up to you, it will actually feel extremely intrusive and might even push the person away.
I'll use myself as an example. So when I was a student, I really cared for my exam grades. So whenever I finished my exam, I would always sink into depression, thinking that I must have completely screwed it up. And whenever that happened, all I wanted was to process these emotions and thoughts privately before I talked to anyone. But the thing is, because I look absolutely miserable, so people around me would always want to talk to me and find out what happened. So they would keep asking me, "Oh my god, what happened? Did you do really terribly in the exam? Maybe you should just study harder next time. You get better. Don't think too much about it, it's just an exam." And whenever that happened, I was always screaming in my head, "Can you please leave me alone?"
Obviously, they had very good intentions and they were not trying to make me feel bad at all. However, it's also true that it would be a lot better if they could just give me the personal space that I needed at that moment. Therefore, you want to make sure that you're not forcing them to open up when they're not ready. However, I understand that it's not always easy to tell if someone's ready for a conversation or not. A simple trick that you can use is just to ask directly.
Instead of speculating whether they need emotional support or not, you can just simply say, "Hey, you look a bit upset. I'd love to listen to you if you want to share, but if you don't want to, that's okay too. Just let me know when you need me. I'll always be there."
By doing so, you're providing an option for them to receive the support instead of forcing them to accept it. That will make them feel a lot more respected and a lot more likely to open up to you when they're actually ready. The final mistake is to try to solve problems for someone who has mental illness.
This is such a common and disastrous mistake that it almost deserves its own video, but I'll try explaining it briefly today.
Growing up, many of us, especially guys, have been taught that the best way to help someone is to offer solution to their problems. So if a little boy is crying because he doesn't have a chocolate bar, then you give him a chocolate bar, he stops crying, problem solved.
While this is strongly true for most people, things get a bit tricky when it comes to someone who has mental illness, and this is due to 3 reasons.
First, the thing that they're complaining about is usually not the root cause of the problem. So let's say a person who has depression tells you about a mean comment. The problem is usually not the comment itself, but the fact that it triggers bad childhood memories of being belittled. Therefore, telling them that they should ignore the comments or how they should deal with haters usually does not help because it does not address the actual issues.
Second, it is very difficult for someone who has mental illness to think about solutions when they are being extremely emotional. When they are having an episode, they are basically in crisis mode. Their brain is telling them, "Listen, there's an emergency, so just drop everything else that you're doing and deal with it first. If not, we probably won't be able to survive."
Therefore, it is very difficult for them to think logically because most of their energy is now used on dealing with their emotions.
That explains why even when you come up with very good solutions, they still seem reluctant to listen.
Third, you might appear to be not caring about them.
Now, I'm sure many of you will object and say, "Why would I even bother giving suggestions if I don't care about them?" I actually completely agree with what you say, but let's try to think about it from the perspective of someone who has mental illness.
For them, the fact that you're spending more time on thinking about solutions than listening to them indicates that you think that emotions are not justified. It shows that you just want the emotions to go away instead of actually understanding their pain.
Therefore, instead of feeling supported, they actually feel ridiculed by you.
Therefore, what you should do instead is to remember that you are there to listen, not to solve their problems.
This is something that you have to keep reminding yourself because it's a bit against human nature to not think about solutions when you're being presented a problem.
A simple trick that can help you is to use physical prompts. For example, you can change your wallpaper into a quote about active listening. You can also use phrases, post-it notes, or anything that you will always have around you. With more practice, you'll get better and better until it becomes a second nature. To review, there are 4 mistakes that we have learned today. First, we should not go into the conversation with the intention of cheering someone up. Alternatively, we should go into the conversation with the assumption that that person probably wouldn't change their mind later. Second, we should not provide emotional support when we are not ready. Instead, if you don't feel ready, you can postpone this conversation or ask other people to help. You can also come up with alternative ways to support a person that are not too energy consuming. Third, we should not force the person to open up when they don't feel ready. Alternatively, we should ask them if they actually need emotional support before forcing it upon them. Fourth, we should not try to solve the problem. Instead, we should try to remind ourselves to listen. If we find it hard to remember, we can use physical prompts to help ourselves. Thank you so much and see you next video. Bye!